Story 1. Fight scene cinematography that involves rapid jump cuts and does not allow you to actually see or understand what is going on. A lot of contemporary films are guilty of this, and it always irks me. Story 2. Honestly, somehow Palpatine returned. It felt like a draft placeholder note. Like, note to self. Somehow Palpatine returned. Absolutely will need to explain this in a reasonable way. Do not forget to come back to this. Story 3. When someone is texting or using the phone and the application doesn't look right. I'm looking at you, Kelly Rowland, using Excel to text. Or when they are using exaggerated or outdated texting abbreviations. Story 4. When a movie takes place in an area I'm familiar with, but was clearly filmed somewhere completely different. Examples. All the Austin, Texas, where I live scenes in Frank, 2014, were shot in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Long Game, 2023, takes place in Del Rio, a dusty West Texas border town, but was mostly filmed in lush, green Columbia. Story 5. I am an upholsterer. In the movie Cruella, the titular character is obsessed with fashion and looking good. Then she owns a chaise lounge with uneven puckering along the front seat edge, which no respectable upholstery shop would let out the door. I lost all my faith in her as a character. Story 6. I saw Endgame in theaters, and when Hawkeye's wife came back and called him immediately, I looked at my buddy and asked, "He's been paying her phone bill for 5 years?" Story 7. When they get up close and personal the moment they wake up in bed, talking while closely facing each other or kissing, all I can think about is the terrible morning breath everyone has when they wake up. Story 8. In some horror or crime films, a victim is often jabbed with a hypodermic needle, and then affected by the compound a couple of seconds later or even instantly. Two parts of this really take me out. 1. Intramuscular injection is not easy. Depending on the needle size and viscosity of the solution, it can take a full minute to inject. 2. Intramuscular injection slowly enters the bloodstream, so even if you did manage to inject a struggling victim with a tranquilizer intramuscularly, it would take a couple of minutes at least before they were immobilized. I think from recent memory the worst offender of this was the show Dexter. He'd just jab someone, and as soon as the needle punctured their skin, they would fall asleep. Story 9. Action movies, including the ultra-serious ones. Stuck behind enemy lines, cut off and surrounded. Lack of food, poor weather conditions, morale is low, death everywhere, and constant attacks from all around. Somehow, the main character's teeth remain pearly white and perfectly straight, especially in medieval-type movies. They all somehow retain relatively clean faces and decent amounts of muscle mass with that vein pump. Story 10. First, the new Star Trek. Spock and Kirk argue, and Spock sends Kirk to the ice planet, where he's chased by a monster to the cave Spock is in. How convenient. Venom crash-landed in Spider-Man 3 right next to where Spider-Man and Mary Jane are cuddling in Central Park. How convenient. Story 11. In Ghostbusters Afterlife, the Slimer-type ghost they chase from the town to the mines follows the roads to the mines. Any flying thing would just fly directly there, not follow roads like it was following directions. I remember watching it and thinking, it's a good thing it's following the roads, so the characters can follow him. Kind of took me out of the movie. Story 12. In Fast 5, The Rock is completely covered in sweat in nearly every scene, while the other characters are all dry and free of excessive perspiration. My wife pointed this out when it was randomly on TV one night and we were watching it. She goes, "Every scene. Look, Paul Walker, dry. Vin Diesel, dry. Tyrese, dry. The Rock just did a CrossFit or half marathon apparently. It doesn't make sense." To which I replied, "Neither does dragging a massive bank vault through the streets of Brazil and using it as a wrecking ball against all those cops. But yeah, The Rock's mystery sweat does pop the believer bubble of the Fast and Furious." Story 13. Guns are very loud. I've always wanted to see a movie where they have a gunfight in a medium-sized metal warehouse, followed by all the dialogue being yelled because everyone's ears are ringing. Story 14. People who make amazing shots with pistols with very little effort. I'm looking at you, Walking Dead. I don't care how much practice Carl has at this point. Headshot after headshot on moving targets 50 yards away with a pistol is just silly. Story 15. In Batman Begins, the plot device is a microwave generator that makes water explode. In the climax of the movie, it is turned on and heading by train to the central water processing plant of Gotham, where it will vaporize all the water in the city and distribute fear toxin that has been dissolved into it. In an effort to stop it, Batman swings up onto the train and gets in a fistfight with Ra's al Ghul right next to it. We are treated to a cinematic display of water bursting out of nearby pipes while these two humans, who are made of mostly water, do not explode. Story 16. Guns making a sound when you point them at people. The worst case of this was the Doctor Who episode End of Time Part 2, where every time the Doctor pointed his gun at someone, it made that cocking sound, and if I recall correctly, it was a revolver. Grenades blowing up with huge fireballs. Grenades are fragmentation killers. It isn't the explosion that kills, it is the metal fragments that kill. Pulling the pin from a grenade with your teeth. That will rip your teeth out before the pin. Suck the venom out. No, you just poisoned another person. No one connects Batman to the billionaire who can afford to fund things like a customized car or jet. A vigilante shows up in my part of town, confronting lowlifes with high-tech gadgets and a customized car, boat, and jet. I think a few of us would suspect the billionaires or even the super mega millionaires in the area. Story 17. Wait Until Dark has a plot similar to a MacGuffin, with bad guys chasing after a heroin-filled doll that somehow ends up in protagonist Susie's possession. Susie has recently become blind and depends on her young neighbor for errands and minor things around her house. The doll is a mama doll, and the problem is that mama dolls have a chest cavity filled with a bellows-like contraption that permits the mama sound to emanate from the chest. The idea that the doll is stuffed with heroin is ludicrous. No, there's no room in the doll for drugs. Maybe you could squeeze in a half gram of some substance in the doll, but all those bad guys chasing around for this minuscule substance in the doll makes the movie look more like a Carol Burnett parody special than a real movie. Story 18. In Tom Cruise's War of the Worlds, the initial invasion has an electromagnetic pulse that destroys all electronics, but the first reveal of the aliens is through a working camcorder screen that was dropped in all of the commotion. Story 19. When actors light a cigarette, take a few puffs, then throw half of it away, those things are expensive, and if you are addicted to nicotine, there is no way you are not smoking the whole thing. Story 20. This is stupid but stood out to me. In Crimson Peak, the main character is in a decrepit old manor house taking a bath. She's got a fire going, but the door is wide open to the drafty hallway. It makes no sense at all. Story 21. When the blood on face is applied by the makeup artist while the actor is seated, the corpse is lying down and the blood is going against gravity. Story 22. A badly done CGI character or scene. It doesn't matter which movie or who is in it, but you get to the big battle scene or dramatic speech, and a character appears who is so badly done it throws you out of the moment. See The Rock in The Mummy Returns. Story 23. I know this will get buried, but in the live-action Beauty and the Beast, you can hear an owl hunt. Then it pans to a freaking barn owl. Barn owls can't hoo. They screech. Story 24. There is a scene in Captain America: Civil War, where Captain America and Iron Man are fighting, and it is very obviously my college. They didn't even attempt to hide it with computer graphics. It's my community college. Makes sense why the university campus was closed for weeks all those years ago. Story 25. In Interstellar, when that guy is explaining while they're in the spaceship to Matthew McConaughey what a black hole is. Are you kidding me? So, they let this person pilot a spaceship to hop into a black hole, but he doesn't know anything about outer space? Forget you, Mr. Nolan. It is easily the worst exposition dump I've ever seen in any movie. Just hilariously bad. I still can't believe they wrote, shot, and edited that and thought, we've got ourselves a winner. Story 26. Bob Odenkirk as the girl's dad in the 2019 Little Women. I can't see him as the characters he plays. He is just Bob Odenkirk. Yay! Dad's home from the war. That's Mr. Show. Story 27. This takes me out of so many movies and TV shows now, and if you read the rest of this comment, it may ruin it for you too. Whenever any character eats food, you almost never see them swallow. like ever, because if they had to swallow, they'd have to do it potentially dozens of times, once for each take. By the end of it, they'd be sick. So they have spit buckets to spit the food out into between takes. I can't not think about that every time a character is eating. Story 28. Pretty people everywhere. Struggling single father of 3 in 1920s New York City. Perfectly aligned, bright white teeth and a great haircut, just like all 3 kids. 30-something female dying of an illness, who looks like they just got back from Paris Fashion Week. Studio needs an older King Arthur, insert Brad Pitt, need a young King Arthur, insert Timothée Chalamet. Where are the Gandolfinis, Robin Williams, Buscema's? Good in their own way, but their roles have been filled with iPhone kids. Story 29. When a character is knocked unconscious due to a blow to the head, so that they can be removed from the story for a while until they wake up, that is not how brains or severe head injuries work. Story 30. It happens all the time, but the one that comes to mind is Battleship. She gets a concussion, they acknowledge the concussion, it's a bit of a plot point, and then she never has any lingering effects. Concussion symptoms can last for a week or more, especially if you don't slow down. At the very least, she could allude to the fact that she's dizzy or her head hurts or she's having trouble concentrating, something. If you're going to make head trauma a touch point, don't just forget about it in the next scene. Story 31. How nice everyone's houses and apartments are. Like, no, you're broke. Or they have a job that would never be able to afford that much home anyway, like teachers, nurses, and students working part-time. Also, product placement cars. Always the latest model, perfectly clean like it just got detailed. They'll often do this thing where a character has an old car of the same make and model, then gets replaced by a new model. Like an old Mustang in a garage followed by a new Mustang in a later scene, then the new one is wrecked and they get the old one out of the garage. This often happens with trucks too because having an old beat-up pickup is manly, but then a new one will show up later. Sometimes it's like the bad guy drives the brand new one, and the good guys drive the old one. Story 32. Cash has weight and volume. $1 million in $100 bills weighs 22 pounds and takes up 0.4 cubic feet. About 3 liquid gallons of volume. So in a heist movie, you have people running around with a gym bag supposedly holding $10 million, which would be the size of an oil drum, or tossing a backpack of $5 million like it's a sack of marshmallows rather than 110 pounds of paper. Story 33. I fight pretty hard to avoid acknowledging that Lauryn Hill, in Sister Act 2, does not rehearse with the class but still gets the leading role in the choir. I love the movie, so I try very hard. Story 34. New animated Lord of the Rings movie. When the Northmen are wearing rags in the freezing winter and seem just fine, while a main character, fully dressed, freezes into a solid block of ice in a blizzard. Also, there's a wild interpretation of a medieval siege tower. Story 35, the scene in BlacKkKlansman, when they walk on an elevated boardwalk and talk about blaxploitation movies, feels out of place visually, as it absolutely does not look like the 1970s. Other than that, the movie is a masterpiece. Story 36. When there is a fight and everyone involved is highly skilled in martial arts, or it's a modern show or movie and someone uses a sword, katana, or nunchaku to fight. Story 37. When characters enter a new building, arena, field, or space that is clearly created with computer-generated imagery, and they do the long, wide-eyed look around, taking in everything, then the camera pans to show the audience what they see. Other than the original Jurassic Park, most times this just doesn't work. Acting with a green screen is hard. Story 38. Wilhelm screams. The reason is that it's so commonplace it passively reminds you, this is a film. I remember watching Mad God, don't watch it. I couldn't sleep for 2 days, and I was really immersed until I heard the Wilhelm scream. Directors need to let the actors just make a scream. Can't be that hard. Story 39. I'm currently a freelance baker. I love it. I bake a lot. I've worked in restaurants in the past. Any movie or TV show where they show a chef or baker breaks illusions for me so quickly. Usually it's not knowing how to hold a chef's knife properly. Looking at you, friends. But so often when it's a woman baker, they are wearing heels with their hair down and a perfectly placed stripe of flour on their cheek. My friend was watching some Hallmark movie a few weeks ago, and the main character was a professional baker. She was baking hundreds of loaves of bread wearing jewelry, corduroy pants, heels, and a sweater. If I tried to long-haul bake in real pants, I would die of heat stroke. Story 40. The actors are in a car, looking at zombies with the car window open. Nobody would have the car window open if there were zombies 10 feet away. Story 41. When a solution or enemy weakness is too obvious, like in the movie A Quiet Place when the aliens wiped out most of humanity and all you had to do was play loud high-frequency noises to defeat them at the end. I mean, come on. Aliens with sensitive hearing and nobody figured something that simple out. Story 42. In the cinematic masterpiece Gordy, the singing pig uses his fame to save his family from being sent to the sausage processing plant. No way they're sending piglets to that plant. That's such a waste. They'd be full-grown before becoming food. Really wasted some world building with that one. Story 43. Whenever an action movie has a scene in a professional kitchen, the set dressing is always ridiculous. There are always dozens of knives sitting out and piles of untouched produce, and things like 1-pound bags of flour from the grocery store, even though kitchens wouldn't be working with quantities like that. Aside from Watchmen, none of these scenes ever bother to use the deadliest weapon in the kitchen, the fryer.